Pysander, to revenge his hurt, right? Pysander, to revenge his hurt, right on the king ran he. A bloody fate ran he. A bloody fate suggested him to let him run on thee, O Menelaus, that he might by thee in dangerous war be done to death. Be done to death. Both coming on, Atrides' lance did err. Pysander struck. Both coming on, Atrides' lance did err. Pysander struck Atrides' shield, that brake at point the dart, not running through. That brake at point the dart not running through. Yet he rejoiced, as playing a victor's part. Atrides, drawing his fair sword, upon Pysander flew. Pysander from beneath his shield his goodly weapon drew. From beneath his shield his goodly weapon drew. To Pysander from beneath his shield his goodly weapon drew. Two-edged with right sharp steel, and long the handle olive tree. Sharp steel, and long the handle olive tree well polished. Sharp steel, and long the handle olive tree well polished. And to blows they go. Upon the top struck he Atrides' horse-haired. Upon the top struck he Atrides' horse-haired feathered helm. Atrides on his brow, above the extreme part of his nose, laid such a heavy blow that all the bones crashed. Underneath it. And underneath it. That all the bones crashed. Atrides on his brow, above the extreme part of his nose, laid such a heavy blow, that all the bones crashed under it, and out his eyes did drop before his feet in bloody dust. He after and shrunk up his dying body, which the foot of his triumphing foe opened and stood upon his breast, and off his arms did go. Upon his breast, and off his arms did go. This insultation used the while. All right, let's pull Menelaus' voice. Now also give me ear, whom grief... Oops, hold on, I moved the... This insultation used the while. At length forsake our fleet. Thus ye false Trojans. At length forsake our fleet. Thus ye false Trojans. At length forsake our fleet. Thus ye false Trojans. To whom war never enough is sweet. Nor want ye more impieties, with which ye have abused me, ye bold dogs, that your chief friends so honorably used. Nor fear you hospitable Jove, that lets such thunders go. But build upon it. He will unbuild your towers that clamber so, for ravishing my goods and wife in flower of all her years, and without cause. Nay, when that fair and liberal hand of hers had used you most lovingly. And now, again, ye would cast fire into our fleet, and kill our princes if you could. Go to. One day you will be curbed, though never so ye thirst, rude by war. Though never so ye thirst, rude war. Though never so ye thirst, rude war. Though never so ye thirst, rude war by war. Go to. One day you will be curbed, though never so you thirst, rude war, by war. O Father Jove, they say that thou art first. They say that thou art the first in wisdom of all gods and men. Yet all this comes from thee. And still thou gratifiest these men, how lewd soever they be, though never they be cloyed with sins, nor can be satiate, as good men should. Satiate, as good men should, with this vile war. Satiety of state. I don't know that I've ever actually heard it pronounced. Satiety, satiety, satiety? I assume it's satiety, like to satiate. I've seen it written plenty of times. Oh. This one says satiety. I'm going to check another one. I was wrong. Okay, it says satiety. All right. Lewd soever they be, though never they be cloyed with sins, nor can be satiate, as good men should, with this vile war. Vile war. Satiety of state, satiety of sleep and love, satiety of ease, of music, dancing can find place. Yet harsh war still must please past all these pleasures, even past these. They will be cloyed with these before their war joys. Never war gives Troy satieties. This said, the bloody arms were off, and to his soldiers thrown, he mixing in first fight again. And then Harpalion, kind King Pylaemon's son, who gave... Might as well check the names here. I do not have Harpalion written down. Why not? I must have missed it. Okay. Harpalion. Harpalion. That's what I figured. If it was ancient Greek, it would be Harpalion, Harpalion, Harpalion. But you wouldn't do it that way in English, not in the kind of English we transliterate ancient Greek from, which is to say, through Latin. Troy Sitietes. This said, the bloody arms were off. This said, the bloody arms were off, and to his soldiers thrown, he mixing in first fight again. And then Harpalion, kind King Pylaemon's son, gave charge. I forgot to check Pylaemon. I might as well check if anyone else is in here. No. Pylaemon's son gave charge, who to those wars of Troy his loved father followed, nor ever did enjoy his country's sight again. He struck the targe of Atreus' son, full in the midst, his javelin steel, yet had no power. His javelin steel yet had no power to run the target through, nor had himself the heart to fetch his lance, but took him to his strength and cast on every nor had himself the heart to fetch his lance, but took him to his strength, and cast on every side a glance, lest any his dear sides should dart. But Merion, as he fled, sent after him a brazen lance that ran his eager head through his right hip. That ran his eager head through his right hip. It settled him, and set his spirit gone. It settled him, and set his spirit gone amongst the hands of his best, and set his spirit gone amongst the hands of his best friends. And like a worm he lay, stretched on the earth, with his back blood best friends. And like a worm he lay, stretched on the earth, with his black blood imbrued and flowed away. His corse the Paphlagonians did sadly wait upon, reposed in his rich chariot to sacred Ilion, the king his father following. Dissolved in kindly tears, and no wreak sought for his slain son. But at his slaughterers, incensed Paris spent a lance, since he had been a guest to many Paphlagonians, and through the press it pressed. There was a certain augur's son that did for wealth excel, and yet was honest. There was a certain augur's son that did for wealth excel, and yet was honest. He was born and did at Corinth dwell, who, though he knew his harmful fate, would needs his ship ascend. His father this one also I don't have a name for. I feel like, am I using the wrong? No, I'm not using the wrong pronunciation guide. All right, the Greek would be Boliuidos. I guess I would render that into English as Polyidus. Paluido. Yeah, you wouldn't put the emphasis on the U. This is why, by the way, there's not really like a correct way to pronounce ancient Greek names in English, because there's too many different. There are rules for certain schools of thought with it, but at the end of the day, you're making a judgment calls. Rather, there are rules for rendering it into English in the like way that comes from Latin. But I'm especially in this version, Chapman tends a lot of times to actually use more Greekish spellings that seem to suggest he wants not the Latin version of the name. So yeah, I'm kind of doing like a judgment call on everything here. But I always check it first from the ancient Greek and then work from there. did at Corinth dwell, who who, though he knew his harmful fate, would needs his ship ascend. His father needs his ship ascend. His father, Polyidus, oft would tell him that his end would either seize him at his house upon a sharp disease, or else among the Grecian ships by Trojans slain. Both these desired by Trojans slain. Both these together he desired to shun, but the disease at last, and lingering death in it, he left, and war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt and war's quick stroke embraced. And war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt his ear and cheek ran in. Oh, you know what? I need to put these, because I already did the pronunciation guide for the next chapter, so I need to then now replace these into the master guide. All right, the other one was a word, satiety. Okay. And war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt his ear and cheek, and war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt his ear and cheek ran in. Betwixt his ear and cheek ran in, and drave the mind of both those bitter fortunes out. And war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt his ear and cheek ran in, and drave the mind of both those bitter fortunes, and betwixt his ear and cheek ran in, and betwixt his ear and cheek ran in, and drave the mind of both those bitter fortunes out. Night struck his whole powers blind. Thus fought they like the spirit of fire, nor Jove loved Hector knew. Thus fought they like the spirit of fire, nor Jove loved Hector knew how in the fleet's left wing the Greeks his down-put soldiers slew almost to victory. The god that shakes the earth so well helped with his own strength, and the Greeks so fiercely did impel. Yet Hector made the first place good, where both the ports and wall, the thick rank of the Greek shields broke. He entered, and did scull, where on the grey sea's shore were drawn, the wall being there but slight, Protesilaus' ships, and those of Ajax, where the fight of men and horse were sharpest set. There the Boeotian band, long-robed eons. Now we gotta check this. Iaons. Ions, I wrote. Locrians, Phthians, Epeans, Meges, Phylides, Amphion, Amphion, Dracius, Dracius. Oh, that's very Latinish. Phthians, Medon, Menoptolemus. And just to give you an idea of this thing, the master pronunciation guide, only up through book 14 at this point, because I've done the next book guide as well, is over 1,000 names of places and people, and sometimes words. So that it's a lot to keep track of. obviously I know how I pronounce many of the main character names, but 1,000 pronunciations of character names that I wouldn't even necessarily pronounce the same way in each different translation. I have to keep track of that on a sheet. I can't just do that off the top of my head. And if somebody did try to do it off the top of their head, thinking they were, clever about it, they're just going to be inconsistent and not get the names right each time, or not get them the same every time when they say them. Protesilaus' ships and those of Ajax, where the fight of men and horse were sharpest set. There the Boeotian band, long-robed Ions, Locrians, and brave men of their hands, the Phthyian and I want to check Ions again. Ions. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Ionians. I've never seen it written Iaons. Epeans. Okay. Is that Phidias? Phidias. Dracius. Amphion. Amphion. Phylides. Phylides. Is that right? Did I do that on the master guide? Phylides. What the hell? Somehow inconsistent pronunciations are slipping through in my guides. I gotta work on that. It's not supposed to be possible because I'm matching the names of ones I already wrote using the find matches feature. But the problem is that Chapman will write the same name with different spellings for whatever reason. I don't really, just to suit the look of the verse, I guess. And so then the computer can't find it. Like Phyleus, Phyleus, and then I have another entry for Phyle with an umlaut, US. And so it's like, okay, well, the computer's not going to find that those are the same name. So yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's up to my judgment and trying to keep it all straight on top of using the document. Brave men of their hands, the Phthyian and Epean troops. The Phthyian and Epean troops did spritefully assail the godlike. I think this should be darker. Yet Hector made the first place good, where both so well helped with his own strength, and the Greeks so fiercely did impel. Yet Hector made the first place good, where both the ports and wall, the thick rank of the Greek shields broke. He entered and did skull, where on the grey sea's shore were drawn, the wall, and did skull, where on the grey sea's shore were drawn, the wall being there but slight, Protesilaus' ships and those of Ajax, where the fight of men and horse were sharpest set. There the Boeotian band, long-robed Ions, Locrians, and brave men of their hands, the Phthyian and Epean troops, did spritefully assail the godlike Hector rushing in, and yet could not prevail to his repulse, though choicest men of Athens there made head, Stichius and there made head, amongst whom was Menesthius chief, whom Phidias followed, Stichius and Bias, huge in strength, the Epeans. Let's just check Stichius and Bias. Okay. Phidias followed, Stichius and Bias, huge in strength. The Epean troops were led by Stichius and Bias, huge in strength. The Epean troops were led by Meges and Phylides' cares, Amphion, Dracius. Meges and Phylides' cares, Amphion were led by Meges and Phylides' cares, Amphion, Dracius. Before the Thyians, Medon marched, and Menoptolemus, and these with the Before the Thyians, Medon marched, and Menoptolemus, and these with the Boeotian powers bore up the fleet's defense. Oileus by his brother's side stood close, and would not thence for any moment of that time. Stood close, and would not thence for any moment of that time. But as through fallow fields black oxen draw a well-joined plough, and either evenly yields his thrifty labor. All heads crouched so close to earth they plow. All heads crouched so close to earth they plow the fallow with their horns, till out the sweat begins to flow. The stretched yokes crack, and yet at last the furrow forth is driven. So tough stood these to their task, and made their work as even. But Ajax Telamonius had many helpful men that when sweat ran about his knees, and labor flowed, would then help bear his mighty sevenfold shield, when swift Oiliades. So here he wrote Oiliades, probably because he wanted it to fit into the meter. His sevenfold shield, when swift Oiliades the Locrians left, and would not make sevenfold shield, when swift Oiliades the Locrians left, and would not make those murderous fights of priests, because they were no. Okay. His sevenfold shield, when swift Oiliades, when sweat ran about his knees and labor flowed, would then help bear his mighty sevenfold shield, when swift Oiliades the Locrians left, and would not make those murderous fights of priests, because they wore no bright steel casques, nor bristled plumes for show, round shields nor darts of solid ash, but with the trusty bow, and jacks well quilted with soft wool, they came to Troy, and were in their fit place as confident as those that fought so near, and reached their foes so thick with shafts that these were they that break the Trojan orders first. And then the brave armed men did make good work with their close fights. Before, behind whom, having shot, the Locrians hid still. And their foes all thought of fight forgot, with shows of those far-striking shafts. Their eyes were troubled so. And then assuredly from the ships and tents the insulting foe had miserably fled. the insulting foe had miserably fled to Troy, had not Polydamas thus spake to Hector. Okay. Let's pull in Polydamas and probably also Hector. Hector and all our friends of Troy, we indiscreetly. Polydamas thus spake to Hector. Hector, still impossible 'tis to pass good counsel upon you, but say some god prefers thy deeds in counsels. Oh, okay. Counsel upon you. But say some god prefers thy deeds. In counsels would thou pass us to? In all things none exceeds. To some God gives the power of war, to some the sleight to dance, to some the art of instruments, some doth for voice advance. And that far-seeing God grants some of the wisdom. God grants some the wisdom of my mind. God grants some the wisdom of the mind, which no man can keep to himself, that though but few can find, doth profit many, that preserves the public weal and state, and that who hath the best can prize. But for me, I'll relate only my censure what's our best. The very crown of war doth burn about thee. The very crown of war doth burn about thee. Yet censure what's our best. The very crown of war doth burn about thee. Yet our men, when they have reached thus far, suppose their valors crowned, and cease. A few still stir their feet, and so a few with many fight. And cease. A few still stir their feet, and so a few with many fight, dispersed thinly through the fleet. Retire then, leave speech to the rout, and all thy princes call, that hear in councils of most weight. And all thy princes call, that here in councils of most weight we may resolve of all, if having likelihood to believe that God will conquest give, we shall charge through, or with this grace make our retreat and live. That God will conquest give, we shall charge through, or with this grace make our retreat and live. For I must needs affirm, I fear the debt of yesterday, since war is such a god of change. Of yesterday, since war is such a god of change, the Grecians will now pay. Of change, the Grecians will now pay. And since the insatiate man of war remains at fleet, if there we tempt his safety, no hour more his hot soul can forbear. This sound, forbear. This sound stuff Hector liked, approved, jumped from his chariot, and said, Trojans and hardy Greeks. Chariot, and said, Polydamas, make good this place, and suffer not one prince to pass it. I myself will there go, where you see those friends in skirmish, and return, when they have heard from me, command that your advice obeys, with utmost speed. This said, with day-bright arms, white plume, white scarf, his goodly limbs arrayed, he parted from them like a hill. He parted from them like a hill removing all of snow, and to the Trojans, and to the Trojan peer, he parted from them like a hill removing all of snow. He parted from them like a hill removing all of snow, and to the Trojan peers and chiefs he flew, to let them And to the Trojan peers and chiefs he flew to let them know the counsel of Polydamas. All all turned and did rejoice to haste to Panthus gentle son, being called by Hector's voice, who through the forefights making way looked for Deiphobus, King Helenus, Asciades, Hirtacian Okay, I don't have Hirtacian. I have Hirtacides. Another one that I somehow wrote the wrong pronunciation for. Okay, this is a little bit concerning, the way that these guides are starting to drift. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm going to say Hirtacian. Asius. Asciades. Okay. All turned and did rejoice. All turned and did rejoice to haste to Panthus' gentle son, being called by Hector's voice, who through the forefights making way looked for Deiphobus, King Helenus, Asciades, Hirtacian Asius, of whom some were not to be found unhurt, or undeceased, some only hurt and gone from field. As further he addressed, he found within the fight's left wing the fair-haired Helen's love, by all means moving men to blows, which could by no means move Hector's forbearance. His friends miss, so put his powers in storm, which could by no means move Hector's forbearance. His friends miss, so put his powers in storm. But thus in wonted terms he chid. You with the finest form, impostor, woman's man, where are in your care marked all these, Deiphobus, King Helenus, Asius, Hirtacides, Orthrioneus, Acamas? Now haughty Ilion shakes to its lowest groundwork. Orthrioneus. King Helenus, Asius, Hirtacides, Orthrioneus, Acamas. All these, Deiphobus, King Helenus, Asius, Hirtacides, Orthrioneus, Acamas. Now haughty Ilion shakes to his lowest groundwork. Now just ruin falls upon thy head past rescue. He replied. All right, we gotta pull in Paris. Because thy sharp reproof, thy head past rescue. He replied, Hector, why chidst thou now when I am guiltless? Other times there are for ease, I know, than these. Other times there are for ease, I know, than these. For she that brought thee forth not utterly left me without some portion of thy spirit to make my brother thee. Thy spirit to make me brother thee. But since thou first broughtst in thy force to this our naval fight, I and my friends. But since thou first brought in thy force But since thou first brought'st in thy force to this our naval fight, brought'st in thy force to this our naval fight, I and my friends have ceaseless fought to do thy service right. But all those friends thou seek'st are slain. But all those friends thou seek'st are slain, excepting Helenus, who parted wounded in his hand, and so Deiphobus. Jove yet averted death from them. And now lead thou as far as thy great heart affects, and we will second any war heart affects. All we will second any war that thou endurest, and I hope my own strength is not lost, though least I'll fight it to his best, not further fights the most. I'll fight it to his best, nor further fights the most. Fight it to his best, nor further fights the most. This calmed Hector's hot spleen, and both turned where they saw the face of war. Most fierce, and that was where their friends made good the place about renowned Polydamas and godlike Polypete, Palmus, Ascanius, Morus, that Hippotion bid. All right, let's just check these. Palmus, Ascanius, Ascania, Morus, Hippotion, Falses, I'm going to say. Falses. I'll say falses. And Orpheus, Cebriones, Polydamas. Okay. Palmus, Ascanius, Morus, Hippotion, Ascania, Falses, Orpheus, Polydamas, and godlike Polypete. Make good the place about renowned Polydamas and godlike Polypete. Palmus, Ascanius, Morus, and Morus that Hippotion did beget. Morus that Hippotion did beget, and from Ascania's wealthy fields, but godlike Polypete, Palmus, Ascanius, Morus that Hippotion did beget, and from Ascania's wealthy fields, but even the day before arrived at Troy, that with their aid they kindly might restore some kindness they received from thence. And in fear fight with these, Falses, from thence. And in fierce fight with these, Falses, and tall Orpheus stood, and bold Cebriones. And then the doubt Cebriones, And then the doubt that in advice Polydamas disclosed. And then the doubt that in advice Polydamas disclosed, to fight or fly, Jove took away. Or fly, Jove took away, and all to fights disposed. And as the floods of troubled air to pitchy storms increase, that after thunder sweeps the fields and ravish up the seas, encountering with abhorred roars. Encountering with abhorred roars, and roars when the engrossed waves boil into foam and endlessly one after other raves. So ranked and guarded the Ilians marched. Some now, more now, and then marched. Some now, and then more upon more, in shining steel, now captains than their men. And Hector, like man-killing Mars, advanced before them all, his huge round target before him, through thickened like a wall, with hides well couched with store of brass, and on his temple shined his bright helm, on which danced his plume. And in this horrid kind, all hid within his world-like shield, he every troop essayed for entry, that in his despite stood firm and undismayed, which when he saw and kept more off, Ajax came stalking then, and thus provoked him. Okay. We need Ajax greater. Oh, friends, the lot is mine. Came stalking then, and thus provoked him. O good man, why fright'st thou thus our men? Come near. Our men. Come nearer, not arts. Come nearer, not art's wanton war. Wanton war makes us thus navy bound, but Jove's direct scourge. His armed hand makes our hands give you ground. Yet thou hopest o'er thyself our spoil. But we have likewise hands to hold our own, as you to spoil, and ere thy countermands stand good against our ransacked fleet, your hugely peopled town our hand shall take in, and her towers from all their heights pulled down. And I must tell thee, time draws on, when flying thou shalt cry to Jove and all the gods to make thy fair-maned horses fly more swift than falcons, that their hooves may rouse the dust and bear thy body hid to Ilion. Bear thy body hid to Ilion. This said, his bold words were confirmed as soon as spoke. This said, his bold words were confirmed as soon as spoke. Jove's bird, the high-flown eagle, took the right hand of their host, whose wings high acclamations struck from forth the glad breasts of the Greeks. Then Hector made reply. Hear now what he made reply. Vain-spoken man and glorious, what hast thou said? Would I, as surely as the son of... Thou said, Would I, as surely as the son of Jove and of great Juno born, adorned like Pallas, and the god that lifts to earth the morn, as this... Would I, as surely were the son of Jove and of great Juno born, adorned like Pallas, and the god that lifts to earth the morn, as this day shall bring harmful light to all your host, and thou, if thou darest stand this lance, the earth before the ships shall strow thy bosom torn up, and the dogs with all the fowl of Troy and the dogs with all the fowl of Troy be satiate with thy fat and flesh. Be satiate with thy fat and flesh. Be satiate with thy fat and flesh. This said, with shouting joy, his first troops followed. This said, with shouting joy, his first troops followed, and the last their shouts with shouts repelled. Greece answered all, nor could her spirits from all show rest concealed. And to so infinite a height all acclamation strove, they reached the splendors struck about the unreached throne of Jove. Rest concealed, and to so infinite a height all acclamation strove, they reached the splendors struck about the unreached. They reached the splendors stuck about the unreached throne of Jove. They reached the splendors stuck about the unreached throne of Jove. Stuck about the unreached throne of Jove.